Hey guys, this is part two. Because unfortunately, when you do these things on a phone, apparently it gives you a data limit on how big your file can be, and 4 gigabytes was all it will allow. So I have to do a part two. So I left off in part one, and I was talking about evolution, and I was talking about the possibility of it or what was going on with it, and we can't get away from a cause. So we have this amoeba-like structure or species, if you will, that is now going to spread off and, cause other species to form and everything like that. It just makes absolutely no sense why it would occur that way. Because there's only one species, if we're only showing up and it's only one species that ever showed up and we all evolved from this primordial ooze, then it just in survival of the fittest, well, the amoeba really would have no reason to evolve or maybe even split off into other species. Because, okay, maybe evolve, as conditions on the earth change and everything like that, but it really has no reason to become multiple different species, but maybe evolve into something different to handle. That would be, something plausible. But then you also have things like the now I can't think of what it is. This is gonna bug me. So I'm just gonna leave it alone. I'm gonna drop it. Oh man, that's gonna bug me. Okay, anyways. But even if we have that common ancestor, even if all that occurred, even with all that highly illogical statements right there, even if all that happens, let's get back to it. It still had to have a cause. So what caused it? What caused this species to form out of the primordial ooze? What caused the primordial ooze? What caused the earth? What caused the solar system? What caused the universe? We get back to that, and we get back to this inescapable thing of there has to be a cause. Well, there has to be a cause, then there has to be something that caused it. It means what caused it? And that's why we postulate God. We sit there and we talk about the Big Bang Theory, and we get back down to there's an infinite amount of mass and an infinitely small space, and it just exploded into existence. But the thing is here's the deal. If most scientists agree that time, space, and matter had a beginning. So if time had a beginning and mass had a beginning and space had a beginning, they had to occur instantaneously. Or there would at least have to be time and space before there could be mass. You can't have mass with no time. And you can't have mass with no space. Because if there's no space, you're not going to put mass anywhere. You can't. Where's it going to go? Nowhere. So you don't have mass unless you have space. And you can't have mass and space unless you have time. Because what mass does is over a period of what? Time. If it's got velocity, it's over what? A period of what? Time. So time had a beginning, mass had a beginning, space had a beginning, and it all began simultaneously. And so the thing is this, if it all began simultaneously, that means there was a point in time where there was no mass, and if there is no mass, then there is no gravity. And that just blows Stephen Hawking's saying out the water, because there's such a thing as gravity, the universe can and will create itself. Well, gravity only exists because mass exists, and if mass had a beginning, that means there was a time where there was no mass. That means there was a time where there was no gravity. So again, we get back to what? We get back to there was nothing. And it's hard to conceive that idea or the notion that there was absolutely nothing. I mean, you're talking about there's no hydrogen atoms, there's no helium atoms, there's no oxygen atoms, there's no nitrogen atoms. There's nothing that's going to make up your composition. There's no carbon atoms. There's no no atomical structure whatsoever that's making anything up. There's no stars. There's nothing. There was nothing, then there was something. We cannot escape that fact. If we're going to sit there and say that time, space, and matter had a beginning, then we have to be willing to say that mass had a beginning, because mass is matter. Matter has mass. And so therefore, if mass had a beginning, if matter had a beginning, then mass had a beginning, and that means there was a time where there was nothing, not even time, there was no matter, there was no space. So what caused it? What caused it? You cannot escape this. This is something that you cannot escape, and that's why, we get to this idea, you say that, what does it say here? I've never been presented a valid logical argument which also employed sound premises that lead deductively to a conclusion that a God exists. But the thing is this, is when you have absolutely nothing at the beginning, when time began, when matter began, and space began, and you have nothing before that, there is only one logical conclusion. That is deductive. That is a sound premise. You have only one conclusion when nothing existed in the first place. This is stuff you can go look it up on scientific articles. You're talking about the vast majority of scientists agree that that time, space, and matter had a beginning. I think even Stephen Hawking agreed with that. But there was a really famous guy who didn't believe in God who agreed with that. It all had a beginning. All it began somehow, somewhere. But if you don't have matter, you don't have mass. If you don't have mass, you don't have gravity. You want to talk about fallacious arguments? That's pretty fallacious on Stephen Hawking's philosophical statement. Great physicist, great guy, genius. When it came to philosophy, he should have hung up his hat. So there's that. That's a logical premise. It's a sound premise, and it will deductively, if you let it, it will deductively lead you. There has to be a cause, and there is nothing. That means the cause has to be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. You cannot escape that. Then we look at, we look at how it's designed. I mean, you look at, if the earth is any closer to the sun, we'd burn up. If the earth is any further away from the sun, we would freeze to death. So we're at the right position from the sun to where we're not going to burn up and we're not going to freeze to death. Sometimes it feels like that, but we're not, right? We're in what's called a habitable zone. And according to Hugh Ross and a lot of other astrophysicists out there, there's 13 habitable zones. Go look at Hugh Ross and listen to him and look up habitable zones and Hugh Ross. He has a lecture on it. It's just absolutely amazing. I had the wonderful opportunity to listen to that in person. So it's a great, great opportunity to get at and watch and listen. So, guys, go check him out. Look up habitable zones and Hugh Ross. And you'll notice if we're just on the outside of any of these habitable zones, we don't exist. And that's just within our solar system. His argument is that the whole universe exists just so that we can exist. And that there really is no reason to believe that there's more life out there. Because the odds of a planet being in the right kind of galaxy, at the right spot in the galaxy, circling its sun and all the habitable zones, are just astronomical, pun intended. They're astronomical. It's just not plausible, but yet here we are. See, the greatest miracle that has ever occurred already occurred. The greatest phenomenon that has ever occurred has already occurred. The fact that the universe exists is the greatest phenomenon. But we want to come up with natural arguments for the creation of something that came from nothing. There's no time, there's no space, there's no matter. What is there? Nothing. It means there has to be something timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. And that's where we get to something that's beyond nature, that goes beyond that third dimension. So, I think it's logical to assume that. I think it's logical we can get back to God that way. That God exists. Just that he exists. We're not even talking about the God of the Bible. We're just talking about God. God existing. And I think it's logical to assume that. Even if God just created everything and then stood back and let it take place, let nature take its course. Just created time, space, and matter, and then let nature take its course and see what happens. Even if he just did that, God exists. I don't believe he did that. I think he is also interacting with his creation. But we get to also the moral argument. Now, the moral argument states because there's such a thing as good and evil, there's such a thing as God. And the moral argument states is that you cannot have objective morality without God. And the reason why is this. How do we know something is good or evil? There is a standard, but who set the standard? I can't set the standard. Standard was set before I ever got into it. The standard was set before I was ever born. You know, how do we know what is good and what is evil? How can we objectively say that what Hitler did was wrong, what Stalin did was wrong? How can we objectively say that? How can we objectively say that? We cannot say that unless there was a standard. And that standard has to be outside of ourselves. We cannot set the standard. Well, you could say, well, it's good for the advancement of the species. Well, who said that the advancement of the species is good? Again, there would have to be something outside of us that would state that that is a good thing. And I'm just going to throw this out there. If that's the case, that the advancement of our species is good, that right there, without God, is a reason why we should not have abortions. Just throwing that out there. We're getting on another tangent here. But, I mean, honestly, I don't even need God to argue why we shouldn't have abortions. If the advancement of our species is a good thing, yet we're going to kill the babies before they ever come out of our womb. That doesn't sound like we're advancing our species. That sounds like we're depleting our species. It doesn't sound like multiplication. That sounds like division and subtraction. Sorry. We'll continue on. Moral argument. There had to be something to state that even the advancement of the species is a good thing. How do we know that's a good thing? It means there's a standard. There's a law. There's a moral law. That means any type of law we have, there's a lawgiver, and that would be God. It doesn't just come up with DNA. It's not just because it's in our DNA and we dance to his music, as Richard Dawkins says. It's not that. There is something beyond ourselves that states something that's good or bad. For instance, I'm going to talk about my oldest son, Levi. And when he was, I don't know, I guess maybe 6 months, there's certain things that he does not understand, certain concepts that he doesn't understand. Like, I never taught him the concept of stealing. Yeah, he knew what it was. Here's how I know. I think he was about 6 months. So, honey, Tiffany, if you're watching this, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think he was about 6 months old. But she probably remembers doing this too. And it was really cool because this is something that God revealed to me. But I would give him, he would have a toy. And in his mind, that toy was his. It's my toy. It's in my possession. It's mine. Okay. Now, if I go up to my son at this age, because when you get older, it gets more complicated. Okay. But when I go up to my son at this age, say, son, can I have that? He would give it to me out of his own free will. He'd say, here you go, Dad. He didn't say, here you go, Dad. That'd be pretty impressive for 6 months. But he would give it to me, and I would take it. And if he gave it to me, he wouldn't cry. It was fine. Why? Because in his mind, this is mine. He asked for it. I'm giving it to him out of my own free will. So it's fine. It's cool. It's cool. You asked for it, and I'm willing to give it to you. Now, the opposite also holds true. If I didn't ask my son for it, and I took it, he would cry. Why? What's going through his mind? This is mine because it's in my possession. This is mine. And he took it from me, and I don't like that. Isn't that what stealing is? Taking something that doesn't belong to you? I don't like that. I don't like that, right? This is one of the reasons why in Scripture it says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Why? Because I don't like that. I don't want it done to me. You know, how many of us are willing to go and steal from somebody else or lie or cheat or steal, but we don't like being lied to, cheated on, or even stolen from, right? How many of us are willing to go and do that for our own selfish purposes? You know, so we say that there's such a thing as morality, but where did morality come from? Where did that law come from? The same way, where did the nature come from? Where did the universe come from? It came from God. God exists. Let's go on to the next point. I've never observed a phenomenon in which the existence of a God was a necessary antecedent for the known or probable explanation for the causation of that phenomenon. All right, well, I touched on this with the beginning of the universe. There was nothing, then there was something. Time, space, and matter had a beginning. There was nothing, then there was something. How do you explain that beyond God? I mean, besides God, how do you explain that? And there's just no logical explanation, because if time, space, and matter had a beginning, and you postulate that multiverse is out there that caused our universe, well, that means time was still going on. And if time had a beginning, that means that also still had a cause. You're eventually still going to get back to the beginning of time. You're still going to get back to the beginning of matter. You're still going to get back to the beginning of space. So you're still going to get back to a point where there was nothing, absolutely nothing, and what caused it. You're going to get back to that point no matter what way you toss the dice, no matter which way you throw things, you're going to get back to the point that there was nothing. You have a phenomenon right here, and it's called the universe. Any phenomenon that has ever happened within the universe, well, I challenge you. I'm gonna throw this out here. I'm going to read a couple other points here first, and then I'll throw this out. Several proposed and generally accepted explanations for observable phenomena that were previously based on the agency of a god have subsequently been replaced with rational, natural explanations, each substantiated with evidence that excluded the agency of a god, and he's never encountered vice versa. Well, thing is this, again, we get back to that whole thing, beginning of the universe, beginning of all this, where there was nothing and now there is something. What caused it? What caused it? Because whatever it is, it has to be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. So what caused it? What is your logical flow, and what do you deduce from that? Now, any observable, now this is what he does say, he says observable phenomena that were previously based on the agency of a god. Well, here's the deal. This is where I'm going to challenge you. I challenge you to go to a Pentecostal church. And I mean a Pentecostal church. If you go in there and you don't see stuff going on, go to a different one. go to a Pentecostal church that's in the middle of revival. The reason why I'm saying this is I grew up as a Presbyterian, and I didn't realize what I had access to as a Christian. And as a Presbyterian, had I read what this guy commented, probably been enough for me. Probably would have been enough for me. Well, the guy's right. I never experienced any of this. There are natural explanations. Yeah, this guy's right. That's me as a Presbyterian, right? But like I said earlier in part 1, I got way too much experience now. I've experienced way too much, but I go to a Pentecostal church now, and I've realized what I have access to as a Christian. Now, I can sit here and tell you about how God healed me of a hernia, miraculously healed me of a hernia. After I prayed to him, I can tell you about that. Is it verifiable? No. Why? I was alone in my bed. Do I have any reason to lie to you? No, I don't. I don't have any reason to lie to you because I feel that we have something here that is, heaven exists, and man, I want you to experience that. So I have no reason to lie to you. I'm not going to make something up to get you into something that I know is real. So if I know it's real, I got no reason to lie. If I don't think it's real, then I got all the reason to lie, but then what's the point? What's the point? There is no point, so I have no reason to lie to you. I've had certain experiences. I've experienced other people get healings. I've experienced this happen right before my eyes. No doctors, no nothing. Just prayer and petition to God, and a healing occurred. I don't believe in coincidence. It's not a coincidence that happens. So you can get out and you can see all this different stuff too. So I challenge you, go find a Pentecostal church in revival. I at first thought like healing evangelists, they were a sham. Until you see it with your own eyes. That's what you're going to think. Especially if you get to know some of these people. That's what you're going to think. It's a sham. Until you get to know some of these people, and you know some of these people that have a condition, and then you see them get healed right before your eyes. So, we're getting close to the end, guys. Don't worry. Just bear with me for a little bit longer. I've never experienced the presence of God through intercession of angels, divine revelation, the miraculous of divinity, or any occurrence of a supernatural event. Again, I go back to go to a Pentecostal church. That's my challenge to you. Can I argue for it? Objectively argue for it? No, I can't. If you never experience it, you never experience it. It's something you need to go out and experience. But it's real. It's there. I wouldn't push you towards it if I didn't think it was. I wouldn't push you towards it if I didn't feel it was. Every phenomenon that I have ever observed has emerged from necessary and sufficient antecedents over time without exception. In other words, I've never observed a phenomenon, entity, process, object, event, substance, system, or being that was created ex nihilo, that is, instantaneously came into existence by the solitary volition of a deity. Now we're going to get back to the universe. And we get back to that again. The universe is ex nihilo, means it was out of nothing. It was out of nothing. There was once no universe, now there is universe. Came from nothing. So, now it's out of what? Solitary volition of a deity. How? I mean, unless you can present me with something other than that, there's really no ability for there to be any type of natural cause for the universe's existence, because no matter what, you're going to get back to the beginning of time, the beginning of matter, and the beginning of space, and what's before that? Nothing. So whatever it is has to be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. We can't conceive of it, but we can perceive it. Just like Carl Sagan said in his video that we can perceive a fourth dimension. And then number 10, this is why I said we're wrapping it up here. All claims of a supernatural or divine nature that I have encountered have either been refuted to my satisfaction or do not present as falsifiable. I think if it doesn't present as falsifiable, it might be something that you want to look into. I look into things of atheism that are not necessarily falsifiable. You know, it's, okay, well, it's not falsifiable. It might not be verifiable, but there's certain things within atheism that are not falsifiable or verifiable. Where does the evidence lead you? We can say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but I think there's extraordinary evidence. The fact that we exist is pretty extraordinary within itself, and that within itself is evidence. So the fact that we exist and we don't exist, we look at all these different fine-tuning structures and everything like that. If we're a little bit closer to the sun, we die. If we're a little further away from the sun, we die. If we're a little lighter, we, we're going to die. If the earth was a little lighter, if the earth was a little heavier, we were going to die. There's a state in which, the earth would be landlocked, as it, not landlocked, but polarly locked, where it won't rotate as it just goes around the sun. So only one side of the earth. If I think it was, I don't remember what would cause that. This is what I'm saying. Go check out Hugh Ross and his stuff. I mean, you're going to find some lectures from him that are just absolutely amazing. So there's something that would cause us to be, our polars would be locked and we wouldn't rotate. So you only got one side. One side would be way too hot. The other side would be way too cold. So there's so many differences, so many things that just within the cosmos that, if we change something just a little bit, we don't exist. If we change certain aspects of the universe, we don't exist. If we change certain aspects of the atomic structure, then atoms don't exist. And atoms are what? The building block, right? So, again, we get back to that, so you look at this, it appears to be designed. Why does it appear? If it appears to be designed, then it's logical to assume that it's designed. It's like if I go walking down on a beach and I see a bunch of driftwood up there and it says help, there's a mind behind that, right? Because somebody designed that driftwood in such a way that says help. It is logical to assume that there was a mind behind that rather than the waves knocked the driftwood up there in such a way that it made that word. Is it possible? Yeah. Probable and plausible? No. So, that being said, the next thing, too, is when you say atheism, and I'm going to conclude with this, and I'm going to thank you for watching my video. When you say atheism and you say, well, I'm simply withholding acknowledgement of a deity until sufficient credible evidence is introduced, you're not really saying much. You're not giving something else. You're not giving us something else that is a possibility or a plausibility. Frank Turek talks about this a lot. He says, you go to a crime scene and you see a murder happened and you're like, well, I think it's suspect A that did it and this is why. Your partner cannot say, well, I don't think it's suspect A, and leave it at that. Your partner would have to come up, well, then who do you think did it? I think it's suspect B, and this is why. So if you think it's atheism, besides all these that you have not observed, what are your, because the thing is this, is you didn't observe it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And sitting around and waiting for sufficient credible evidence, I look for evidence of everything. Is there a possibility, God doesn't exist? Yeah, it's possible. Personally, I don't think it's logical. But I will look for evidence. I'm going to continue looking for evidence. And the more and more I find evidence, the more and more I see God. So, that being said, guys, thank you for taking the time just to listen to this. And especially bear with me through a 2-part video. Guys, I love you. God bless. Guys, if you got something to say against me, comment. email me. And guys, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel. I love you.